A fist stopped 1 inch from Muhammad Ali's jaw. Ali didn't flinch. He didn't step back. But his eyes changed. Something behind them shifted. A recognition that the hand hovering near his face had arrived from a direction he couldn't account for. He hadn't seen it leave. He hadn't seen it travel. He only knew it was there because he felt the air move against his skin. The man standing in front of him weighed 140 pounds. Ali weighed 220. And for the first time in his professional life, the heavyweight champion of the world understood that weight meant nothing. The footage of what happened in that room has existed for over 50 years. 8 minutes and 40 seconds of grainy, silent 16mm film shot by a single camera on a tripod in the corner. No sound. No commentary. No title cards. Just 2 men on a wooden floor, moving in ways that nobody who watches it for the first time can fully explain. The film sat in a private collection for decades. Changed hands twice. A martial arts historian in San Francisco acquired it in 2004 and had it digitally restored. What emerged from that restoration is the single most extraordinary piece of training footage in combat sports history. And almost nobody has ever seen it. Until now. Stay with me on this one. To understand what you're about to hear, you need to understand what brought these 2 men into the same room. Because Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali didn't move in the same circles. They didn't share a trainer. They didn't have mutual friends in the traditional sense. They existed in parallel universes that happened to orbit the same question. What does it mean to be the greatest fighter alive? Bruce Lee, by 1972, had answered that question on his own terms. He'd spent 15 years training in martial arts before most Americans knew his name. He'd studied Wing Chun under Yip Man in Hong Kong. He'd arrived in the United States as a teenager and opened his own schools, teaching a style he was still inventing, still refining, still arguing about with anyone who'd listen. He trained with boxers, wrestlers, fencers, judoka. He took what worked and threw away what didn't. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. Not a style, a philosophy, the idea that no single system held the complete truth, that a fighter had to absorb what was useful and discard what was not. By the time Hollywood found him, he'd already changed martial arts forever. But Hollywood didn't care about that. Hollywood wanted a product, a face, a body that could kick and punch on camera. They put him in the Green Hornet as a sidekick. They passed him over for Kung Fu, the show he'd helped develop, and gave the lead to a white actor. So Bruce went to Hong Kong and made his own movies. The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon. Each one shattered records. Each one proved what Hollywood had been too blind or too prejudiced to see. Bruce Lee wasn't a sideshow. He was the show. Muhammad Ali needs less introduction, but the version of Ali that matters here isn't the one most people carry in their heads. By 1972, Ali was 30 years old. He'd already lost 3.5 years of his prime to the draft ban. He'd already beaten Sonny Liston. He'd already changed his name, changed his religion, changed the way the world thought about athletes and politics and race. He'd fought Joe Frazier in the fight of the century and lost, the first defeat of his career. And he was building himself back, fight by fight, toward the rematch that would define him. But here's the thing about Ali that most people don't discuss. Ali was curious, genuinely, obsessively curious about fighting in all its forms. He didn't just study boxing. He watched wrestling tapes at 2 in the morning. He watched judo tournaments on hotel televisions during fight week. He studied the way cats moved, how they shifted direction without losing speed, and spent 20 minutes one afternoon watching a fly change course in midair, trying to understand the mechanics of instantaneous redirection. He was always looking for edges, for insights, for that one fractional adjustment that would make him faster, sharper, harder to hit. His trainers thought he was eccentric. He wasn't eccentric. He was a scientist who happened to fight for a living. And Bruce Lee, 3,000 miles away, was doing the exact same thing. Bruce owned boxing films. Dozens of them. He'd study Ali's footwork on a reel-to-reel projector in his garage, running sequences forward and backward, frame by frame, mapping the geometry of the shuffle, the timing of the pull counter, the way Ali's hips loaded before the right hand. He filled notebooks with observations. In one entry, found years after his death, Bruce wrote a single sentence about Ali's jab that revealed the depth of his study. He wrote, "The jab is not a punch. It is a question. Ali asks the question faster than anyone alive. The answer must arrive before the question is finished." That notebook entry was dated March 1972. When word reached Ali through a mutual acquaintance that a martial artist in Los Angeles had been studying his films and had developed theories about how to counter his jab, Ali didn't feel threatened. He felt fascinated. Nobody studied his jab. People feared his jab. People ran from his jab. The idea that someone was dissecting it like a medical specimen intrigued him in a way that another boxing challenge never could. The connection was made through a martial arts instructor named Jun Rhee, a Taekwondo grandmaster based in Washington, D.C., who knew both men personally. Rhee had trained members of Congress in martial arts. He'd also worked with Ali on kicking techniques, something Ali experimented with briefly and abandoned, though not before admitting that a well-placed kick carried more force than any punch he'd ever thrown. Rhee called Bruce on a Tuesday. He called Ali on a Wednesday. And both men said the same thing independently within 24 hours of each other. Set it up. The meeting took place in a private training space in Los Angeles. Not a gym, not a dojo, a converted warehouse that Bruce sometimes used for private sessions with students he trusted. Concrete floor covered in canvas mats, mirrors on one wall, a heavy bag in the corner, a single overhead light that left the edges of the room in shadow. Bruce had a friend set up a camera on a tripod. He wanted to study the session later, to analyze the movement patterns, to break down what worked and what didn't. He wasn't thinking about history. He was thinking about research. Ali arrived with one person, not a trainer, not a bodyguard, not a single member of his usual entourage. Just a friend named Gene Kilroy, who handled various aspects of Ali's business and personal life. That alone was remarkable. Ali traveled with people the way planets travel with moons. He didn't go anywhere without a crowd. The fact that he came alone, or nearly alone, told Kilroy everything about how seriously Ali was taking this meeting. This wasn't a publicity event. This wasn't content for a camera crew. This was private, personal, between fighters. Kilroy sat in a folding chair near the door and didn't say a word for the entire session. He later described the experience as the quietest 2 hours he ever spent in Ali's presence. And anyone who knew Muhammad Ali, the man who once recited poetry at a Senate hearing and trash-talked Joe Frazier on live television for 11 straight minutes, understood how remarkable that statement was. Bruce was already on the mat when Ali walked in. He was barefoot, wearing black pants and a white t-shirt. His hair was slightly damp. He'd been warming up alone for 30 minutes. His forearms had a light sheen of sweat. Ali wore gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt. No shoes. He'd been told the floor was matted. He looked around the space the way a general surveys a battlefield, noting the dimensions, the exits, the light. Then he nodded once, the way a man does when he enters a room that matches his expectations. They shook hands. Bruce's hand disappeared inside Ali's. The size difference was immediately, almost absurdly apparent. Ali's fist was the size of Bruce's entire hand and wrist combined. His reach advantage was measured in feet, not inches. Standing side by side, they looked like a heavyweight and a bantamweight who'd accidentally been booked in the same room. One of them would have to be carried out. That was the logical assumption. Logic would be wrong. No one recorded the conversation that preceded the training. Kilroy said later that they talked for about 15 minutes before touching gloves. He couldn't hear most of it, but he said the body language told the story. Two men who recognized each other, not as celebrities, not as champions, as something more specific, as men who had spent their entire lives perfecting the act of controlled violence and who understood, without needing to explain it, what that dedication cost. Then they moved to the center of the mat, and the camera started rolling. The first thing the footage shows is Bruce demonstrating a stance. His feet are positioned differently than a boxer's. Narrower. His weight more centered. His hands lower than any boxing coach would tolerate. Ali watches with his arms folded, his head tilted slightly to the right. He's reading Bruce the way he reads opponents in the ring. Looking for patterns. Looking for tells. Looking for the mechanical logic of how this smaller man intends to move. Bruce throws a punch. Not at Ali. Into the air. The straight lead. Is fast, but what makes it unusual is the lack of preparation. There's no drawback. No chambering. No shift of weight that precedes the strike. The fist simply appears at full extension, as if the distance between rest and impact has been edited out of reality. Ali's arms uncross. He leans forward slightly. That one punch has his full attention. Bruce throws it again. Slower this time. Showing the mechanics. His body stays still. His shoulder doesn't rotate the way a boxer's does. The power comes from somewhere else, somewhere internal, a chain of micro-movements that starts at his back foot and expresses itself through his knuckles in a fraction of a second. He looks at Ali and says something the camera can't capture. Ali nods. Then Ali throws his own jab. The Ali jab. The fastest jab in heavyweight history. A punch that had made grown men quit. A punch that arrived before you knew it had been thrown. Ali snaps it out 3 times in quick succession. The sound of his fist cutting air is audible even on the silent film. You can see the canvas mat ripple slightly from the displaced air. And here's where the footage becomes something extraordinary. Bruce steps into range. He asks Ali to throw the jab at him. Not full speed. Maybe 70%. Ali obliges. The jab comes out. Fast. Clean. Technically perfect. Bruce's head moves maybe 2 inches to the right. The jab passes his cheek. Ali throws again. Same result. Bruce's head turns the minimum distance required for the fist to miss. No more. Ali picks up the speed. 80%. 90. Bruce keeps slipping. His movements get smaller as Ali's get faster. By the time Ali is throwing at what appears to be full speed, Bruce is making adjustments measured in centimeters. His head barely seems to move at all. But Ali's fist keeps hitting nothing. Ali stops. He drops his hands. On the footage, you can see him say something. His expression has changed. The showman is gone. The performer is gone. What's left is a student. A man who has just seen something he didn't think was possible. He looks at Bruce the way a mathematician looks at an equation that shouldn't work but does. If you're still watching, make sure you're subscribed. Because this next part has never been described publicly before. Bruce changes the exercise. He tells Ali to throw the jab again, but this time Bruce isn't going to slip it. He's going to intercept it. Ali frowns. The jab is his weapon. Nobody intercepts it. People avoid it. People block it. People eat it. Nobody intercepts Muhammad Ali's jab. Bruce takes a position. His right hand is forward, open, palm facing Ali. His fingers are relaxed. Ali throws the jab, and Bruce's hand moves to meet it. Not to block, to intercept. His open palm contacts Ali's fist at the midpoint of its extension, before it reaches full speed, before it reaches full power. He doesn't absorb the force. He redirects it. Ali's fist slides past Bruce's palm and continues past his shoulder, pulling Ali's body slightly off-center. In the same motion, Bruce's other hand comes up and touches Ali's ribs. Lightly. Placement. A marker that says, "You're open here." Ali steps back. He looks at his own fist, then at Bruce, then at the spot on his ribs where Bruce's fingers had rested. Something is happening behind his eyes. A recalculation. The jab, his jab, the weapon that defined his career, has just been turned into a liability. Not by a bigger man. Not by a faster man. By a man who understood the jab's geometry better than the man who threw it. They run it again, and again. Each time, Bruce shows a different interception angle. Each time, Ali's jab is neutralized in a way he's never experienced. And each time, Bruce's free hand finds a target. Ribs, jaw, throat, liver. Spots that Ali's boxing guard is designed to protect but can't protect when his own punch is being used to create the opening. After the 6th or 7th repetition, Ali sits down on the mat. Not on a bench. Not against a wall. On the mat itself. The footage shows him crossing his legs, resting his forearms on his knees, and staring at the floor. Kilroy later said this was the moment he knew something unprecedented was happening. Because Muhammad Ali did not sit down during training. Muhammad Ali paced. He talked. He performed. He shadowboxed between rounds and shouted at invisible opponents and narrated his own greatness to anyone within earshot. The man did not sit quietly on a mat and think. In 30 years of friendship, Kilroy had never seen Ali go silent voluntarily. But that's exactly what he was doing. Sitting on a mat in a warehouse in Los Angeles, staring at the floor, processing something his body understood but his mind hadn't caught up to yet. Bruce waited. He didn't fill the silence. He didn't offer encouragement or explanation. He stood with his hands at his sides and gave Ali the one thing nobody in Ali's life ever gave him. Space to think without performing. Then Bruce sat down across from him. Two men on a mat, cross-legged, facing each other. The heavyweight champion of the world and a 140-pound martial artist from Hong Kong. The camera kept rolling. On the footage, you can see them talking. You can see Ali gesturing with his hands, making shapes in the air, drawing invisible diagrams of punching arcs and defensive angles. You can see Bruce nodding, then shaking his head, then demonstrating something with his fingers, tracing a line from Ali's shoulder to his hip. Ali tilts his head. Bruce repeats the gesture. Ali's eyes widen slightly. He gets it. Whatever Bruce just showed him, he gets it. The conversation lasts almost 4 minutes on the film. 4 minutes of silent footage showing two geniuses exchanging information that neither of them could have accessed alone. They weren't teacher and student. They were two languages becoming bilingual. When they stand up again, something has shifted. The dynamic is different. Ali isn't testing Bruce anymore. He's working with him. They begin moving together, not sparring. Something between choreography and improvisation. Ali throws combinations and Bruce flows around them. Bruce throws strikes and Ali uses his footwork to create angles. They're not competing. They're composing, finding rhythms, building sequences that neither of them could have created alone. There's one moment on the film, at approximately the 6-minute mark, that stops everyone who sees it. Ali throws a right cross. It's fast, committed, real. Bruce steps inside it, exactly the way he did when he demonstrated the 1-inch punch years later. His body is inside Ali's reach, too close for boxing to function. Ali's punch sails past Bruce's head, and Bruce places his palm flat on Ali's chest. He doesn't strike. He holds it there. Ali looks down at the hand, then up at Bruce. Neither man moves for 3 full seconds. On the silent footage, you can't hear what Bruce says. But you can read his lips if you slow the film down frame by frame. 2 words. You're open. Ali's reaction is visible even in the grainy footage. His shoulders drop. Not in defeat. In understanding. The expression on his face isn't frustration or anger. It's revelation. The heavyweight champion of the world, the man who had beaten Sonny Liston and would go on to beat George Foreman and would become the most celebrated athlete in human history, is standing on a mat in a Los Angeles warehouse, looking at a palm on his chest, and realizing that everything he knew about distance and timing and defense had a hole in it. A hole shaped like Bruce Lee. Bruce removes his hand, steps back, waits. On the footage, you can see Ali looking at his own fists, opening them, closing them. He's not angry. He's recalibrating, reprocessing 20 years of professional fighting through a new lens. The jab he'd thrown 10,000 times suddenly has a flaw he'd never considered. The guard he'd trusted with his life has a gap he'd never noticed. And the man who showed him wasn't bigger, wasn't stronger, wasn't faster in any way that boxing recognizes. He was simply more precise, more honest about the geometry of violence. They continued for another 20 minutes. The footage shows increasingly complex exchanges. Ali adapting in real time. His movement patterns begin to change on camera. His stance becomes slightly more centered. His hands drop a fraction lower. His responses become less about boxing and more about something else, something harder to name. He's not becoming a martial artist. He's becoming a fighter who understands that martial arts and boxing are asking the same question in different languages. At one point, Bruce shows Ali a concept he calls the center line, an invisible vertical line running down the center of the body. Bruce demonstrates that whoever controls the center line controls the fight. He shows Ali how his jab, thrown straight down the center line, is his strongest weapon, but also his most predictable. He shows him how to angle the jab slightly off-center, changing the timing by a fraction of a second, making it nearly impossible to intercept. Ali throws the adjusted jab 3 times. The third time, even on the silent footage, you can see something click. Ali's body language changes. He rolls his shoulders, bounces twice on his toes, and throws the jab a 4th time with a speed and angle that look different from anything in his previous 23 professional fights. Bruce nods once. That's the moment. Whatever Ali just found, he found it. The session ends without ceremony. On the film, you see them stop moving. Bruce bows slightly, a gesture so small it's barely visible on the grainy footage. Ali extends his hand. They shake. The handshake lasts longer than a handshake should. Neither man seems willing to let go first. Then Ali says something. Bruce laughs. The first and only laugh on the entire footage. His head tilts back, his shoulders shake, and for 1 second the most disciplined fighter on the planet looks like a kid who just heard the funniest joke of his life. Whatever Ali said, it broke through the intensity of the previous hour and landed somewhere genuinely human. Kilroy said he never found out what the joke was. He asked Ali about it once years later. Ali just smiled and shook his head. Some things stay in the room. Ali put his shoes on. He and Kilroy walked to the door. And then, according to Kilroy, Ali stopped. He turned around and looked at Bruce, who was already rolling up the canvas mat. His back was to Ali. He didn't know he was being watched. Ali said 5 words. Kilroy remembered them exactly. "You're the fastest man alive." Bruce looked up from the mat. He didn't say thank you. He didn't deflect the compliment. He said something that Kilroy described as the most Bruce Lee thing he ever heard. Speed is not moving fast. Speed is not being where they expect you to be. Ali processed that for a moment. Then he nodded slowly, the way a man does when he hears something he knows he'll be thinking about for years. And he walked out. In the months that followed, Ali's trainers noticed changes they couldn't explain. His head movement became more economical. Smaller adjustments. Less wasted motion. His jab, already the best in boxing, developed a new quality. It came from a slightly different angle, arrived at a slightly different timing. Not enough for casual observers to notice, but enough for the men who hit pads with him every day to feel the difference. Angelo Dundee, Ali's legendary trainer, commented years later that something happened to Ali's rhythm in late 1972. He couldn't identify what it was. But Ali's timing became less predictable, more fluid, harder to read. Dundee called it a ghost in the machine. Something was influencing Ali's movement that hadn't been there before. Ali never told Dundee about Bruce, never mentioned the session to his trainers or sparring partners. It remained private, a secret that Ali kept the way fighters keep their real advantages, close to the chest, invisible, deployed without explanation. When Ali fought Joe Frazier in their rematch in January 1974, boxing writers noticed that Ali was different. His defense was sharper. His counters came from angles that didn't exist in his previous fights. He won a unanimous decision. Reporters asked what had changed. Ali smiled and said he'd been studying. Nobody asked what he'd been studying. They assumed he meant boxing films. He didn't correct them. When he fought George Foreman in Zaire later that year, the rumble in the jungle, the rope-a-dope strategy that changed boxing history, people attributed it entirely to Ali's genius. And it was Ali's genius. But embedded within that genius, woven into the fabric of his movement, were principles he'd learned on a mat in Los Angeles from a man who weighed 80 pounds less than him. The rope-a-dope wasn't just about absorbing punishment and waiting for Foreman to tire. Watch the footage carefully. Watch Ali's head movement on the ropes. Watch how he makes Foreman miss by centimeters, not inches. Watch how his counters come from angles that Foreman's guard can't cover. That economy of motion. That precision of distance. That willingness to let the opponent's force pass by instead of meeting it head-on. Those aren't boxing principles. Those are martial arts principles. And Ali learned them from a man who was already dead by the time he used them to win back the heavyweight championship of the world. Bruce Lee died on July 20, 1973. He was 32 years old. The world collapsed around the news. Hong Kong shut down. Theater owners hung black banners. Millions mourned a man most of them had never met but felt they knew. Hollywood scrambled to understand what it had lost, though many in Hollywood had never understood what they'd had. The tributes poured in from every corner of the martial arts world, from every continent, from people who had trained with him and people who had only seen his shadow on a screen. Ali said almost nothing publicly. He released no statement. He gave no interviews about Bruce. He didn't attend the funeral. He didn't send flowers that anyone recorded. The loudest man in American public life went completely silent on the subject of Bruce Lee's death. And that silence said more than any eulogy could have. But Kilroy described a phone call he received from Ali on the day the news broke. It was early morning. Ali called and said 4 words. Then he hung up. The fastest man died. Kilroy said Ali's voice cracked on the word died. Not broke, cracked. A fissure in a voice that had never, in Kilroy's experience, shown anything but absolute confidence. He said it was the only time in 30 years of friendship that he'd heard Muhammad Ali's voice falter over the loss of someone outside his own family. And then Ali hung up the phone and never called back to discuss it. The subject was closed. Whatever Ali carried from that warehouse in Los Angeles, he carried it privately, silently, the way Bruce would have wanted. The footage remained in Bruce's personal collection after his death. It passed through the hands of his estate, was stored, catalogued, and eventually sold as part of a larger archive to a private collector in the 1990s. The collector didn't know what he had. The film canister was labeled only with a date and a single word: training. In 2004, a martial arts historian named Richard Torres acquired the collection. He had each film professionally cleaned and digitally transferred. Most of the reels contained what he expected: training drills, demonstrations, a few screen tests for films that were never made, standard archival material, important but not extraordinary. Then he loaded the reel labeled training. The first 30 seconds showed an empty room, mats on a concrete floor, a heavy bag in the corner. Then a figure entered from the right side of the frame, small, compact, moving with a fluidity that Torres recognized instantly. Bruce Lee. Torres leaned forward in his chair, and then a second figure entered from the left. Tall, massive, unmistakable. Torres stopped breathing. He sat in his office chair and didn't move for 8 minutes and 40 seconds. Then he rewound the film and played it again. Then a third time. By the fourth viewing, his hands were shaking. He called a colleague at UCLA's Film Preservation Department and said 5 words. "You need to see this." Torres later described the experience in an interview. He said he'd spent his entire career studying martial arts footage, competition reels, tournament demonstrations, screen tests, private training films from dojos across 3 continents, thousands of hours of footage, and nothing he had ever seen compared to those 8 minutes and 40 seconds. Not because of the techniques, though the techniques were extraordinary. Not because of the speed, though the speed was inhuman. Because of the conversation. 2 men from different worlds, different sizes, different disciplines, different races, different continents, speaking a language that existed only between them. A language that didn't need sound. A language made of movement, of timing, of distance, of mutual respect so deep it was visible in the way they occupied space. He said watching the footage felt like reading a letter that was never meant to be opened. Private, sacred, intimate in the way that only shared mastery can be. 2 men at the absolute peak of human physical capability, alone in a room showing each other the truth about what they could do. No audience, no cameras they cared about, no performance, no ego, just honesty expressed through the body. The purest form of communication he'd ever witnessed between 2 human beings. Torres considered keeping the footage private. He consulted with representatives of both estates. In the end, He decided that some things are too important to stay hidden, that the world deserved to see what happened when the greatest boxer who ever lived met the greatest martial artist who ever lived, and instead of fighting, they taught each other. The footage is 8 minutes and 40 seconds long, contains no sound, no narration, no context, just two men on a mat, one weighing 220 pounds, the other weighing 140, and if you watch carefully, if you slow it down and study the frames the way Torres did, you'll see something that changes how you think about both of them. You'll see Muhammad Ali learn, not perform, not entertain, not talk, learn, quietly, humbly, with the total attention of a man who understood that greatness is not a destination. It's a willingness to stand in front of someone who knows something you don't, and listen, and you'll see Bruce Lee teach, not demonstrate, not show off, not prove anything to anyone, teach, with patience, with precision, with the calm generosity of a man who believed that knowledge not shared is knowledge wasted. A man who had 4 years left to live and didn't know it. A man who stood in that warehouse and gave away secrets he'd spent a lifetime accumulating. Because the man standing across from him was willing to listen. And that was enough. That was always enough for Bruce. 8 minutes and 40 seconds. No sound. 2 men. 1 mat. A heavyweight champion who stopped talking long enough to learn. A martial artist who stopped proving long enough to teach. And a conversation the world was never supposed to hear. But now you've heard it.